Today, Lucas will be presenting a new tool for evaluating opportunities to help farm animals globally. And without further ado, here's Lucas.
Hi, I'm Lucas Alvarenga. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy, Impact, and Research at Mercy for Animals, an international non-profit organization with over 20 years of experience. And today I'm here to talk about the Farmed Animals Opportunity Index, a new tool that MFA is creating to help evaluating how we can help the most animals globally, and how that's going to help with our international expansion plan. Now, MFA focus exclusively on farm animals. But if you're thinking we do that because they are this cute, you're actually right. But that's not the main reason. So let's start taking a look at the magnitude of the problem that involves farm animals in our planet. Almost 200 billion, with a B, land animals and fish are confined and slaughtered every year for food worldwide. Now, if you take a look at this number and multiply it by 20, so taking a look at the past 20 years, that's more than 30 times the number of humans that have ever lived on the planet. Now we know that animals suffer everywhere, and therefore we must create tools and strategies that will be able to help the greatest number of animals worldwide with the limited resources that we have. And it's important that we start understanding the big picture. While nearly 75% of all farmed animals alive at this very right moment are in Southeast Asia, China, and India, less than 5% of the total farm animal welfare budget is allocated there. And if we take a look at US and European Union, we see that that's about 60% of all farm animals living right alive there at this exact moment. But more than 85% of the total farm animal welfare budget is allocated there. So this shows the extreme disparities in our movements when we see how we're allocating our resources compared to where the scale of the problem is. So which factor does Mercy for Animals consider when we're thinking about international expansion? We obviously take the approach of the effective altruism community. We take a look at the scale of the problem, the gladness of our movements, and tractability. But at MFA, we believe that there are two kinds of tractability, or to measure tractability, which I'm going to be describing further in the presentation. There is the genetic tractability and the movement-specific tractability. But besides these three primary factors, we also believe that global influence plays a very important role, because we know that when we promote changes, when we get to implement changes, policy changes in countries that are highly influential globally, they're much more likely to influence policy changes in other countries. Now, our movement historically has paid a lot of attention to the scale of the problem and to the neglectness. Although we have not been so successful at implementing this, I believe a few reasons for that might be because when we think about this, the countries where we have the greatest scale and neglectness, these are also the countries where we have unfamiliar social contexts from the perspective of the European and the American organizations. We have unfamiliar political regimes. We have varying levels of tractability. We have difficulty to develop the movements, including recruiting volunteers and staff and retaining talents. So it's very difficult for us to try to take a look at the countries where we see a huge problem in terms of scale and a huge problem in terms of neglectness, and we simply try to replicate whatever has worked in Europe or in the United States. So MFA believes that it's very important that we take a very close look at tractability. If a country doesn't have a high tractability, it's going to be less likely for us to succeed in our work. Now, the Farm and Opportunity Index is a tool that tries to evaluate tractability. How we're going to be seeing if a country has a high tractability or not. So first, it's important that we understand that we believe we have two kinds of tractability. The first one is the genetic tractability, but there's also other factors that increase the tractability, which we call movement-specific tractability. They are knowledge and attitude towards farm animals, attitudes towards animal and plant-based products, support for animal advocacy, behavioral intentions regarding key advocacy activities, and others. So MFA, when we are thinking about international expansion, we take a look at scale, tractability, and global influence to decide which region to prioritize. And once we identify these regions, we take a deeper look at genetic tractability, movement-specific tractability, state of people power, and global influence to help us identify the most promising interventions across these key advocacy areas. And with all that in mind, we started to think about the Farmed Animals Opportunity Index, which is this tool that we hope to be helping organizations and donors on how to prioritize their resources. So the Farm and Opportunity Index, known as the FAOI, is a composite indicator that provides a holistic assessment of the opportunities to help farm animals in various countries. It's an interactive tool designed to aid animal protection organizations and donors in making database decisions regarding allocation of their resources in a global context, with the overarching goal of maximizing impact for farmed animals. So the Farm and Opportunity Index considers 4 main dimensions to evaluate in order to create a ranking of the most opportunistic countries. They are scale, gladness, tractability, and global influence. Now it's important for me to state that gladness is a dimension that's not going to be available for the launching of the Farm and Opportunity Index. We do not have data yet, reliable data, that we have gathered in order to add into the Farm and Opportunity Index. But to describe these 4 dimensions, we have analysis of many different factors. So under scale, for example, we're analyzing the number of farmed land animals and the number of farmed fish, and also the human population. So both of these factors compose the magnitude of the scale of the problem in our analysis. Tractability is the most complex, but it's so important also to remember that this refers to the genetic tractability analysis. And lastly, we have global influence. Again, we believe that in a region or in a country where policies are being implemented and in these regions are highly influential globally, they're more likely to influence other countries to follow these policies. So we're evaluating soft power according to Elcano Global Presence Index, Cultural Presence Factor, Meat Trade, and Live Animal Trade. Now, we're analyzing all these factors that fits in each one of these 4, or in this case, 3 dimensions. But the tricky part here is that they don't have the same weights, or they should not have the same weights. Now, MFA decided to put, by default, specific weights to scale, tractability, and influence. And these weights are scale with 25%, tractability 55%, and global influence 20%. Now we know that you might disagree with these weights. So the Farm and Opportunity Index is going to give you the opportunity to play with the weights the way you prefer to evaluate the rank of the countries, to evaluate how opportunistic are the countries based on the weights that you defined in this tool. So that's the best part, in my opinion, of this tool, because not everybody is going to agree with the weights that we're setting. And again, we put a lot of weights on the tractability, understanding that if it's less likely for us to be successful in a country, it tends to be not very effective. But if you disagree with that, you can assign different weights on these dimensions. So the first version of the Global Farm Annual Opportunity, the Farm Annual Opportunity Index, that's going to be launched publicly, ranks 60 countries. And the tool is going to allow you to compare and analyze not only countries but also regions. So you can compare North America with Asia, with Europe, and you can compare also region against another country, for example. So you can compare the United States against Latin America. You're also going to be able to view a rank based on only one dimension, for example, scale. If you want to see the rank of the countries only based on the scale, you're going to be able to see that in our index. And you're also going to be able to download the raw data for all factors to be evaluated under each dimension. So if you want to take a closer look at how these raw data look like, you're going to be able to download this in the tool. Now, it's very important to mention that the Farm Annual Opportunity Index doesn't tell us everything. So there are other facts that we encourage for you to have further examination when you are analyzing the Farm Annual Opportunity Index. Those are basically movement-specific tractability, which are these four factors, and more qualitative information, such as cultural norms, history of animal farming, role of religion, presence of influencers that can help the movement, government attitudes towards activism, animal welfare, meat reduction, and so on, prevalence of plant-based alternatives, and ease of finding and retaining quality staff. So Mercy for Animals uses the Farm Annual Opportunity Index as a preliminary stage in a longer evaluation process in order to decide where we're going to be allocating our resources globally. So first we evaluate the Farm Annual Opportunity Index. We come up with a list of the most opportunistic countries. We choose the countries we want to explore. The second stage, we evaluate whether we have special opportunities, and this means that we might know a talented people that we are familiar with and we trust, and they are willing to help already. We might know important stakeholders that can make the work much easier. We also want to highlight that this is a very subjective analysis, so important to have that in mind. The third part is to evaluate potential cost effectiveness, and also this is a projection. It's important to reinforce it's just a projection. And lastly, and probably most important, we conduct scoping studies. And the scoping studies are designed to investigate all the factors that were not identified in the Farm Annual Opportunity Index analysis. So right now, to share this with all of you, we are completing 8 scoping studies in Asia next month, in December 2020. Our intention with those scoping studies now is to design a strategy for the region. Mercy for Animals is considering to set up a regional office in the region based in one specific country that we're still going to pick to oversee the work in those different countries. That's hopefully going to be the beginning of our work, of our big presence in Asia. We currently have a work being developed in India, and we plan to start pilot interventions by Q2 2021. So this also last slide is designed to show how the Farm Annual Opportunity Index, how this tool is important for our international expansion plan. We take a look at these dimensions, and this would not be possible without this tool. We analyze which countries, which regions have the highest global influence level, which regions have a high tractability, which regions have the highest gladness, and highest scale. So based on these factors, we have, depending on these factors in each country, we have different priorities. And priorities doesn't mean that whatever is not in our priorities should not be done. So for example, in a country with a high global level of influence and a high level of tractability, our priority is to focus on creating institutional change, because we believe institutional change is what can promote the greatest impact for animals in the short and mid-term. So if you want to pause this video to take a look at the other dimensions and how we see these dimensions reflected in the priorities that we set for each region, feel free. And this is it. This is Mercy for Animals. I hope you enjoyed the content of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed the initiative that we're creating. We are going to be launching the Farm Animal Opportunity Index by the end of December 2020. That's going to be public in our website. If you have any questions, if you want to connect, if you want to discuss ideas, if you want to collaborate with this project with us, feel free to reach out to me at lucasa@mercyforanimals.org. I hope you have enjoyed and appreciated this presentation, and thank you very much for watching.
Hi, Lucas. Thank you for that brilliant talk. There's quite a few questions already, but I might start off with one of my own. So you talk about the Farmed Animal Open Index as a starting point for evaluating how and where Mercy for Animals will prioritize your animal rights efforts. What is your strategy then for evaluating the effectiveness of that framework once your interventions are in place? How do you, make sure that you're placing the right amount of weight for each of those factors?
Thank you, Bianca. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the questions. A very good one. So yeah, the Farm Animal Opportunity Index is just the preliminary stage of our long evaluation. The scoping study is also plays a very important role for us to understand the areas that we could not cover during the analysis of the Farm Animal Opportunity Index. But it's important to reinforce that Mercy for Animals heavily relies on the regional leaders. So we know that we have our own bias, and it's harder for us to understand the context, the cultural context, and the political environment in other countries. So in order to avoid our bias to interfere in the most potential strategic decisions in other countries, we heavily rely on our regional leaders. So that's very important to point out. And we allow and empower our regional leaders to create their own strategies based on our global 3-year strategic plan that we have at MFA. And based on that, we also have an impact center, which is another tool that MFA has created to keep track of the progress in each one of our main areas of interventions. So basically, public engagement, corporate engagement, the welfare front and the plant-based front, the government affairs and public policies that we have, investigations. So we have an impact center to define the KPIs and the metrics of success, and to estimate the potential animal impact that we're having in each one of these areas.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing a lot of work in all of these regions, which obviously have, huge differences in cultural contexts. Could you give some examples of some of these pilot interventions that you'll be running over the next few years, starting off with what you're doing in Brazil?
Absolutely. Well, as I pointed out in the last slides of the presentation, I think the most promising interventions will depend on the regional context. So we think in regions with that are very influential globally, and regions with a very high tractability, such as the United States and the European Union. We definitely would love to prioritize institutional change, especially because we know that whatever policy we implement there, it's more likely to influence other countries to adopt, to do the same. In countries with less tractability and high scale, of course, we want to prioritize the regions with where we have a a lot of farm animals and a lot of numbers related to the scale of the problem. We want to prioritize building people power while we also explore institutional change. Of course, in more developing countries, we know we're going to face more challenges in terms of enforcement. So even if a company commits to implement a policy, or if a new regulation is created to help farm animals, we know that enforcement is a completely different step in the process. So we are more careful, more skeptical. We know that it can be done, but we definitely want to prioritize building people power to make sure that we get momentum and that we build a strong movement and have power to be pressuring these institutions, both in the corporate level and also in the public level.
Yeah, great, thank you. We have a really interesting question from one of the audience members. Do you think there is any possible scope for machine learning to learn good weightages, say for optimizing certain end goal metrics?
Sorry, Bianca, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so any scope for using machine learning and artificial intelligence to decide on the weightages for each of these factors?
I hope so. This is something that we need to consider. I don't have the answer right now, but that's a really good question. I'd love to connect after
Great.
the presentation.
Sounds good. Yes, well, there's plenty of opportunities to network in this conference, so I'll send you their details in a moment. And so could you, I know you come from a background of the for-profit sector. Could you apply this framework to fields outside of the animal welfare nonprofit sector?
I think so. I think we all need to be data-driven. We all need to define the best criteria that we have in order to be making the most strategic decisions. So I definitely, yeah, for sure. I think in any area of work that we decide to focus our efforts, we should be creating our systems of criteria and the ways to evaluate the progress of our work.
Right, yeah, I definitely see this framework being applied to different fields, particularly the alternative protein sector, which is my area of expertise. Another audience question, this might just be the last one because we're running out of time. Do you face any pushback from large organisations and private corporations whose profits depend on farming and agriculture? And obviously those are the organisations that are often very well funded. If so, what is the best approach to address this?
So pressure from big companies, is that the question?
Yeah, that benefit from animal farming.
Yeah, we face this all the time. And I think MFA takes a very intelligent approach, which is to not see them, to see them as potential allies. So we want to show them the benefits of making this transition. I think we think this change is inevitable, and we hope to do a good job at helping them to start making a transition. And one of the greatest projects that MFA has been launched recently is the transformation. If anyone is interested, I recommend Googling it to get more information about it.
Great, thanks so much, Lucas. We're running out of time, but thank you so much for that talk and all of the work that you're doing, not just in Brazil, but all over the world. And we're really looking forward to what you release over the next few months. So yes, I encourage everyone to check out the website, Mercy for Animals. Thanks again, Lucas. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Bianca.